At 5:58 on May 14, 1940, near Sedan, France, the air is low and gray over the Meuse River. The haze smells of wet earth and fuel. In a dispersal area cut into a stand of trees, ground crews pull wheel chocks from a line of aircraft with inverted gull wings, Junkers Ju 87 B-1 Stukas, their black crosses dulled by mud. Oberlieutenant Hans Keller, 26 years old, Staffelkapitän in I/Sturzkampfgeschwader 2, steps onto the left wing root and drops into the cockpit. He is not a famous ace, not yet. He is a dive bomber pilot, and that means he lives closer to the ground than most men in the Luftwaffe ever will. He checks his harness, then his oxygen line out of habit, even though today's mission stays low. He taps the Revi gun sight glass. He looks at the arming panel. At 5:06, his rear gunner, Unteroffizier Franz Merler, slides into the back seat and swings the MG-15 on its mount. A light weapon, 7.92 by 57 mm, drum-fed, limited traverse. It is not a shield. It is a warning system. At 5:11, the flight leader's flare pops over the field. Keller signals, and his crew chief pulls the prop through. The Jumo 211 coughs, catches, and settles into a steady vibration. The aircraft shudders like it wants to break free. Under the fuselage hangs a 500-kilogram bomb, a blunt cylinder with fins, set for delay to punch through concrete and explode inside. The men around Keller once mocked the Stuka as a slow target. They had done it in training, when fighters rolled past them in clean climbs and the Stuka couldn't follow. They did it again after Poland, when the aircraft were turned with holes punched through wings and tailplanes. On paper, it is outdated. Fixed landing gear, limited speed, no chance in a turning fight. But the Stuka is not built to win air duels. It is built to hit a specific point on the ground and hit it hard. At 5:28, Keller's Staffel lifts off in sequence and forms up at 1,500 meters. They head west. Ahead, the German army is pushing to break the French line at Sedan. The crossing sites along the Meuse are crowded with pontoon bridges, engineering trucks, and infantry trying to move under artillery fire. If the French hold the heights, the entire advance stalls. At 06:02, Keller sees the smoke columns. At 06:04, flak bursts begin to flower, small black puffs climbing toward them. Keller tightens his grip. Merler tracks the flashes below, calling them out. Keller's eyes stay on the target area. He is waiting for the signal to roll in. At 06:11, the lead Stuka dips its wing. Keller follows. The formation breaks into individual attack runs. Dive brakes deploy. Airframe noise climbs fast. As Keller rolls into the dive, the Jericho Trumpet siren begins to wail.
War documentary. The Stuka drops nose down. Keller's body floats against the harness as the horizon flips into a vertical wall of smoke and river. The airspeed needle climbs past 350 kilometers per hour, then 400. The dive angle tightens towards 70 to 80 degrees, the aircraft built to do what most pilots are taught never to attempt. At 06:12, the Meuse fills the cockpit. Keller can see the crossing points through gaps in the trees, engineers, trucks, men moving in clusters. He does not aim for troops, he aims for equipment, a pontoon bridge, a gun position, a road junction, a precise location where one explosion stalls a battalion. Flak intensifies. Light 25 mm and 37 mm shells burst near the riverbanks, their tracers arcing up in uneven ladders. Keller feels the aircraft twitch as fragments snap past. Moeller shouts the direction of fire, but there is no evasive action in a committed dive. The only defense is the clock. At 06:13, Keller steadies the Rivi sight on a French battery position on the eastern heights. Guns dug in behind earthworks, their muzzle flashes bright in the morning dim. He holds the dive until the last safe moment. The Stuka's design gives him that margin, automatic pull-out assistance, sturdy wings, and dive brakes that keep the speed inside structural limits. It is not graceful, it is controlled violence. At 06:13:18, he presses the release. The SC-500 drops clean. There is a split second of weightlessness as the aircraft lightens. Keller counts without speaking. 1, 2, 3. At 06:13:22, he yanks the stick back into the pullout. The G-force pins him down. The aircraft groans but holds. The altimeter spins fast. 900 meters, 700, 500. The ground climbs like a fist. At 06:13:26, Keller levels out just above treetop height and shoves the throttle forward. The Jumo engine answers with a deeper roar. Behind him, Moeller fires short bursts at a flicker of movement on the ridgeline, more for suppression than effect. The MG-15 is not going to win a duel with a fighter. Its purpose is to keep heads down and warn of pursuit. At 06:13:34, the bomb detonates. The blast rises as a dirty, rolling column. Earth, splinters, and smoke swallow the French gun position. Keller does not watch for long. Dive-bombing doctrine forbids it. The Stuka survives by leaving the target area before the defenders can correct their aim. By 06:21, Keller's Stoffel is reforming at 1,200 meters. Some aircraft are missing. One returns with a torn flap and oil streaking back from the cowling. Another drags a bent landing gear fairing. The formation continues anyway. The mission is not a single strike, it is repetition, pressure applied in timed waves until a line breaks. This is what the Stuka becomes in 1940. Not a plane, but a method. In the opening weeks of the Western campaign, German armored columns depend on speed. French doctrine expects set-piece battles and prepared lines. The Luftwaffe's dive bombers do something the enemy struggles to answer in time. They hit strong points and artillery exactly when ground forces need them removed. At 07:05, Keller is back over Sedan for a second run. The sirens begin again, and men on the ground, soldiers and civilians alike, learn the sound before they learn the shape of the aircraft. Even when the bombs miss, the noise forces movement, breaks formations, and drives people into cover. That is the terror component. The precision is the other half. And Keller, who once heard fellow pilots call the Ju-87 a flying coffin, now watches entire positions go silent after a single dive.
On May 15, 1940, the pace accelerates. The German breakthrough at Sedan spreads outward, and the Luftwaffe begins to spend Stuka sorties like ammunition. Keller's Gruppe is tasked against bridges, retreat routes, and artillery concentrations as French units attempt to reorganize. The U-87 is doing its job until the sky changes. At 9:17 over a road north of Rethel, Keller spots the first sign of it, a thin line of silver specks coming in fast from the west. Not flak, not reconnaissance, fighters. Muller calls it a second later. Jaeger, high, left. Keller knows the numbers. A U-87B1 tops out around 390 kilometers per hour in ideal conditions, slower once loaded and low. A modern fighter can run it down at will. The Stuka is not built to escape. It survives when German fighters are overhead and the enemy's fighters are absent or late. At 9:19, the formation tightens instinctively. The Stukas drop toward the deck, trying to hide in the ground clutter. Keller sees the silhouettes sharpen, Hawker Hurricanes, likely from RAF squadrons that have begun to appear over France in growing strength. Their approach is direct, the angle chosen to cut across the Stuka's escape line. At 9:20, the first Hurricane fires. Tracers stitch the air behind the lead aircraft. The Stuka ahead shudders, then rolls, losing altitude too quickly. Its gull wings tilt like a broken hinge as it disappears into the tree line. Keller does not have time to look for impact. He pushes down. The altimeter unwinds. 300 meters, 200, 100. The Stuka skims fields and hedgerows, and the world becomes a blur of green and brown. This is not evasion, it is a calculated gamble. The closer he gets to the ground, the harder it is for a fighter to maintain a clean firing solution without crashing. At 9:21, Muller fires. The MG-15 rattles in short bursts, the drum magazine limiting sustained fire. The gunner's job is not to shoot a fighter down, it is to force a break, make the attacker jink, make him pull up, make him lose the angle. It works for a moment. A Hurricane slides across their rear quarter, then pulls away. Another drops in immediately. At 9:22, rounds strike Keller's aircraft. The first impacts are dull thumps, then a sharper crack as something important is hit. The Stuka's control response changes, heavier, less clean. Keller checks the engine instruments. Oil pressure is steady, coolant temperature rising, but not catastrophic. He stays low and drives forward. At 9:24, German fighters finally arrive, Bf-109s, diving from above, slicing between the Hurricanes and the Stukas. The air fight becomes vertical and fast. Keller cannot participate. He can only run beneath it and hope the fighters do their job. By 9:31, his Staffel regroups with fewer aircraft again. This time the losses feel different. Flak is expected. Fighters are personal. That afternoon, at 16:40, Keller lands at a forward strip and climbs out to see the damage. The left wing has holes through the skin near the root. The tailplane is peppered. One hydraulic line is leaking, leaving a dark stain along the underside. The crew chief runs his hands along the punctures and says nothing. The Stuka's myth is real, but so is its limit. The aircraft's terror effect works best when the enemy has no chance to contest the air. When the sky is controlled, the Stuka is an execution tool. When the sky is contested, it becomes what skeptics predicted, a slow aircraft with fixed gear, forced to fly through bullets. By June 5, 1940, as France collapses into retreat and evacuation, the Stuka continues to strike. It helps punch gaps and shatter columns, but each week more Allied fighters appear. The cost rises. And Keller changes with it. He becomes strict. He drills his men on formation spacing, on timing, on pull-out discipline. He insists on fighter escort and refuses unsupported attacks when he can. He is no longer trying to prove the Stuka is fearless. He is trying to keep crews alive long enough to use its precision where it matters. The flying coffin nickname doesn't vanish. It deepens into a warning, spoken quietly on airfields before engines start. On July 10, 1940, Keller reads the operations board and sees the new reality in plain numbers. The targets are no longer isolated gun pits in bridges behind a crumbling front. Now the orders speak of convoys, radar sites, and ports across the channel. The British have fighters on alert, and the distances are longer. A Stuka sortie is no longer a short sprint over friendly territory. It is a trip into defended airspace with limited fuel margins and limited escape options. At 11:38, his Staffel crosses the French coast at 1,800 meters, heading toward a shipping lane. The wind pushes them slightly north. Keller watches his airspeed and the clock. He knows how much time they have before turning back becomes impossible. When the first black bursts of flak appear, he feels the old pressure return. Only this time, the fear is not artillery from the ground. It is the certainty that fighters will arrive. By 12:06, they are engaged. British fighters drop through the formation. A J-87 behind Keller takes hits and falls away in a shallow spiral, unable to hold altitude. Keller keeps his nose down and his aircraft steady because the Stuka's accuracy depends on discipline. The technique is still the same. Dive breaks out, steep angle, release at the planned height, pull out before the airframe fails. But the conditions have changed. The Stuka can still strike precisely, it just cannot survive precision and pursuit for long. After that summer, Keller is moved out of frontline command and into instruction. At Stuka training units, he teaches what the 1940 campaigns proved and what they also warned. The J-87 is devastating under air superiority, fragile without it. He drills new crews on bomb fusing, dive angles, and the mechanical limits of the airframe. He teaches them that the rear MG-15 is a deterrent, not protection. He teaches them to expect losses when escort is late and to abort rather than press a hopeless run. It is not hero talk, it is survival math. By 1942, newer aircraft and changing tactics begin to push the J-87 into different roles: ground attack with cannon-armed variants and low-level strikes where speed matters less than accuracy and coordination. Keller watches the shift with professional distance. The terror weapon reputation remains in public memory, but in briefing rooms the language is colder. Sortie rates, maintenance hours, escort availability, enemy fighter densities. When the war ends, Keller survives. He is captured, questioned, and later released in the post-war churn. In civilian life, he does not write a triumphant memoir. He works in aviation-related industry and keeps his notes private. Technical observations about training, about what worked, about what failed. He attends a few veteran gatherings and says little. The Stuka, he understands, has become larger than its pilots. Its legacy is not just the siren, it is the demonstration that close air support, delivered on time against specific targets, coordinated with ground maneuver, can collapse defenses faster than artillery alone. Later air forces study the method and also the warning. Aircraft like the J-87 dominate only when the sky is controlled. Museums preserve the aircraft's shape and sound as a symbol of early war Blitzkrieg, but historians return to the same conclusion Keller learned at low altitude in 1940. Precision is powerful, fear is temporary, and air superiority decides whether a flying coffin becomes a weapon or a liability.